From the Sunshine State, this is Tampa Bay's Tan Talk.
It's now time for the fastest and hardest hitting hour in radio, Pull No Punches Radio. Pull No Punches Radio is powered by the Enlisted Nine Fight Company and brought to you exclusively by the Tan Talk Radio Network. Join UFC legend Chris Lights Out Lytle, Enlisted Nine Fight Company founder Dan O'Brien, and media mogul Jay Pagliaro, along with recurring guest Colton Smith for the next hour as we deliver up-to-the-second news, rumors, and discussions from the world of mixed martial arts and sports. And now, here are your hosts, Chris, Dan, and Jay.
I wish I knew then what I know right now. When my parents split, that's when it shook my ground. No source of strength now, my life wasn't clear. Cracks in the foundation, I was living in fear. Paycheck to paycheck, 3 jobs
As
at
the
a time.
universe emanates on New York City, the fastest rising mixed martial arts program on the airways today, Pull No Punches Radio, emanates over Tampa Bay and the Sunshine State. Good morning, everybody. It is Pull No Punches Radio for this Super Bowl Saturday edition of the program. Jay Pagliaro, Dan O'Brien with you here for the next hour as we discuss all things mixed martial arts, sports, and much, much more. Telephone number to call for those of you interested in jumping on board is toll-free 866-826-1340 or 727-441-3000 for those of you in the Tampa Bay area. Feel free to jump on board, give us a thought, give us your thoughts, considerations, opinions, name it, give it. Obviously, the big topics this week, Super Bowl Sunday tomorrow. The Broncos take on the Seattle Seahawks. We'll break down our tales of the tape of this game coming up here a little bit later. We'll also break down UFC on Fox, which happened last Saturday night in Chicago, Illinois, and predict UFC 169, which is taking place tonight, also in New York City. Actually, it's going to be taking place in New Jersey, Newark, New Jersey, as is where the Super Bowl is. But New York, New Jersey, right? Same animal. Right, Dan? I think. I don't know. Maybe not, but what's going on, buddy?
How are you doing today, Jay?
I'm ready to rip, roar, and rock and roll here on Pull No Punches Radio, man. What a big weekend. You know what I mean? How can you top a weekend that not only has the biggest, not only football game of the year, but perhaps the biggest spectacle, the most watched television program of the year, but we kick it off with a UFC event with not one but 2 title fights against 2 gentlemen who, quite frankly, could stake the claim as being the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, that being, of course, Jose Aldo and Renan Barão. I mean, what a night we got. What a weekend we got, man. And what a show we got in store.
Yeah, this is an absolute amazing show today, Jay. I'm looking so forward to this. We got so many good people coming on today to talk about books, talk about a great new show coming up, and these fights tonight are just going to be amazing.
You want to break the news? I mean, we got our first couple of guests coming on tonight, this afternoon, actually here in just a matter of moments. Our first one will be coming on. Dan, since you lined us up for him, I'll give you the honors of letting the listening audience here on the Tan Talk Radio Network know who we got.
Well, the first thing we got today is we're going to bring on Matt Finney, and he's with Discovery Channel, and he is the co-producer of The Fighters, the new show that about the boxers, kind of like an Ultimate Fighter spinoff, I'm assuming, but we're going to find out all about that. And then we're going to bring on Mr. Reed, who wrote the book Fightnomics with Kelly Krieger. So I'm so looking forward to this today, Jay.
I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what we got in store for this. So we got an author and we got a gentleman who, Matt Finney, apparently was a fighter apparently on this new Discovery Channel show, The Fighter. So we definitely ought to be able to get some valuable insight from this. So be sure to check us out again. And for those of you that are trying to figure us out, tune us in. 3 ways to listen to us. Obviously, if you're listening to us on the Tan Talk Radio Network, 1340, 1350, and 1400 AM. That's all obviously the easiest way. Also, you can check us out on TuneIn Radio or Tan Talk Radio Network. So easy cheesy, right? Easy cheesy. But Dan, we'll start things off, though, before we get to our first guest for today. Like talking about what happened last weekend, UFC on Fox in Chicago, Illinois, huge ramifications in the lightweight division, the rapidly developing lightweight division of the UFC. We saw Josh "The Punk" Thompson, Benson Henderson put on a 5-round absolute scrap. This fight was every bit as good as I thought it would be. Back and forth affair. Josh Thompson breaks his hand in the second round, but still goes on to put on perhaps the best performance of his career, which says a lot because this guy's a well-traveled veteran. Ultimately, it was for naught as Benson Henderson picks up a very controversial picks up a very controversial decision when, break this down, Dan. I mean, did the judges get this fight right, first and foremost? As a judge, if you were judging this fight, do you think they scored it correctly?
Well, Jay, originally, after we talked about it, I went back and watched it. I had the fight with Josh winning it 3-2, but I can understand where, the swing round there was probably round 3. I thought maybe even round 4. But I was kind of upset in the sense that the one judge had it so lopsided. The other ones I was okay with the 47-48s, but I couldn't understand. I think it was a 46, if I'm correct. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I asked that too. What the hell was this judge watching? A 49-46? I'm sorry, there's no way that Benson Henderson won 4 rounds. And I'm a Benson Henderson fan. But where are these judges? I mean, come on, seriously? I can see you giving it either way. I can see it 3-2 either way. This wasn't a robbery by any stretch, but how the hell would you give it 49-46? I mean, was this judge like staring at Ariani the entire time? Was he sipping battery acid? I mean, what kind of crap judging is this? But sadly, we see this happen a lot, though, Dan, in the judging landscape. Is every event, and I'll guarantee you there will be at least one fight tonight where the judges will make a call that makes you scratch your damn head and say, what is going on here? What is this nonsense all about? This is the case of one of them, 49-46. I mean, that's just, to me, that was mind-baffling.
Yeah, I didn't get it. If you look at the judges, a lot of times they're looking at that octagon control and they're looking at aggression. And I clearly thought, even with a broken thumb or whatever part of the hand, I think it was a thumb, but I think Josh Thompson was very aggressive during the fight. I think what might have hurt him, though, is he just wasn't able to do a lot with his takedowns. And when you go back and watch the fight, if anything, I would have had it even. But I know draws are like few and far between, obviously. And I'm not going to be real hard on the other 2 judges because I think they did. I could see where they swayed in the direction of Benson Henderson. But the other guy, I just don't think he was even in the same ballpark. And I don't know how that happened. I don't even think Dana White was very happy with that.
He shouldn't have been either. I mean, he shouldn't have been. Listen, that's a fight. If you talk to 10 people, and you just read online, you talk to 10 people, I'll guarantee you 5 of them will give it to Thompson, 5 of them will give it to Henderson. And that's not just the people that watch the fight that's never been in there. When you talk to 10 fighters in the MMA community, including people here locally, Jamie Varner, who trains with Benson Henderson at the lab, he's taken a lot of guff for saying this. He said he thinks Thompson won. Then you split it up. I mean, the other half says, so you could go 5-5 down the line. I mean, it was that close of a fight. I know a lot of people calling it a robbery. I've seen some robberies in MMA, Dan. This was nothing close to it. It was a good fight. And, for Thompson, I know he's talking about retiring. He's wondering what his next step is. And at 36 years old, this sets him back a little bit. But how can you be disappointed with that performance? I mean, to me, that was the best performance of his career against a top 2 lightweight. He did what we've rarely seen, and that's take Benson Henderson down. And it wasn't just once or twice. He did it quite a few times in the fight. He had Benson on his back on a regular basis. If I'm Josh Thompson, I'm walking away with my head held high and saying, look, there will be another day for me, even at 36. I mean, how can you – there is no fault. And, mind you, he did this breaking his primary hand. He broke his primary hand, which really limits everything, Dan. When a broken hand, when it's your primary striking hand, it not only prevents you from using it in a striking avenue, but it prevents takedowns. I mean, there's so much that really you're limited with a broken limb of any kind in MMA, especially one that you primarily use in a fight.
Yeah, and if you look at the fight too, he did a great job coming back. He started to use his right hand. He didn't go away from it totally. So, yeah, I think he had a great fight, and I will tell you that I think a lot of opportunities going to come up for him because that was a wonderful fight coming over from Strikeforce. He really didn't have a lot of visibility in the UFC, and I think he really made a nice statement for himself fighting a former champion. So it didn't hurt him one bit. No hurt, no harm. And to me, the question I got to ask is, what is next for Josh Thompson? What is next for what? We'll start off with that one. I mean, it's Henderson obviously not going to get a title shot against Pettis at this point because that's already happened.
He's 0-2 against Pettis, so he's sort of working his way back up to that fight. Really, what's next for Henderson? Where do you put him in here? Who do you throw him in there with next?
You know, you got to look around at what's going on. And, you know, after the reaction from Dana when they said, is he ready to get another title fight, I don't know that he is anytime soon. So I think he just needs to take some high, formidable, you know, top 10 guys, and he really needs to start finishing fights again. I think that I'm not going to say they've lost confidence in Benson Henderson. He's still a great fighter. There is a lot of 55ers out there that he hasn't tested the water with, and it's probably going to be a nice statement for him if he can win a couple of those top 10 guys here coming up to get another shot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what we've got going on here, you know, is like you said, I think finishing fights, to my knowledge, Benson is yet to finish a fight in his UFC career. And that's not saying his fights haven't been exciting, because they have, but I think he does need to finish that fight. You know what I'm going to put him in there with? And I know, you know, this guy may be in line for a title shot, but to me, the next step in line would be natural. It's a natural transgression. You throw TJ Grant in there with Pettis. He was supposed to get the shot to begin with before he got hurt. Throw TJ Grant in there against Pettis, and then take the next steps. Put Khabib and Benson together. Number one contender fight. That's, you know, that's where we go with this avenue. You put those two in there and see how it rolls. But we do have our next guest. Bill, who do we got?
Matt, he's ready.
All right, let's roll. Dan, if you could go ahead and introduce Matt for us.
Matt, you with us?
I'm with you.
Hey,
let's go ahead and introduce him. First and foremost, our next guest is a cast member on the Discovery TV show, The Fighter. He is Matt Finney. Matt, thanks for joining us here on Pull No Punches Radio.
Thanks for having me.
Dan, go ahead and ask the first question.
Well, hey, I just want to thank you for coming on the show. When we got reached out to, said you wanted to come on. Very excited about it, and we just want to hear what you got going on and how we can help you out, buddy.
Well, the situation has changed, so I'm not exactly sure what's going on right now. The show aired once, and then I don't know. There's some difficulty with the network or whatever it is. We're not getting the full information yet, but as of right now, it's stopped airing. So I'm told that they're looking for better options or better ways to air it or something. But as of right now, it's getting pushed back a little bit. So they have a little more time to talk about it, I guess.
Okay. Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm sorry?
Tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit about yourself. What got you into combat sports? What's your experience level? And explain yourself. Give a biography, if you could, of who you are.
For me, yeah, tell him come in. Yeah. Just head right in, Peter. I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of the gym right now. For me, it was started out, boxing was my first love. You know, I loved watching it, and I loved basically learning it by watching it. A neighbor of mine gave me a heavy bag, and I went nuts on it. But I started out with a trainer, Bobby Andrews, and then he introduced me to Jorge Rivera, which Chris knows pretty well. We spent some time down in Australia and training with our camps. But yeah, it was from there. You know, I took a $25 jiu-jitsu lesson from George, and he loved it. And you know, I was like, I'm fixed. I'm in. He's choking me out silly, and yeah, this is an arm bar, snapping my arm. This is a triangle, choking me out. He's like, what do you think? I'm like, I like it. So pretty much from there, you know, I was hooked, and we started training together. And boxing really took over as more of my passion throughout the years. I kind of went that direction, especially hooking up with Peter Welch. You know, his teaching style and his boxing is just ferocious. So it's hard not to fall in love with that.
Dan, go ahead, your question, bud.
Well, I just wanted to ask you. I said, I don't know if you're able to talk about this, Matt, but as far as the show was going, I mean, was it in line along the same lines of The Ultimate Fighter, or does it have a different kind of spin?
The great thing about the show is it's not like The Ultimate Fighter. I think it's a better hybrid. A lot of the things in The Ultimate Fighter, you know, they try and push through the storylines versus kind of tell each person's story, and, you know, just to get to the house drama and the fights. And the thing about this show is that it's more about the people. You know, what you didn't really get to see in the first episode is that this show, there was nothing fake about it. You know, they had to chop it up, and sometimes it looked a little contrived, but nothing was fake about it. You know, they get to tell that story in an hour. But this show evolved organically, and it just kind of improved as it went. So there are going to be sort of prizes to win, and there are going to be some twists and some showdowns. So, the viewers didn't really get a taste of that, but it's just getting warmed up. And the beautiful thing about it is, everybody looks at boxing and says, like the typical hard luck story, which a lot of us have, and some of us don't. But you get to see that. And a lot of people are knocking it, saying it's just the same old, same old. The beauty of it is if you can look past, if you're not a boxing fan, if you're not a fight fan, that you don't really like the violence or anything like that, you can look past that and see that there's a lot of heart and a lot of great stories to be told from this TV show. And these guys are just the greatest guys on earth.
Well, that's what I really enjoy about these kind of shows. When you guys put these together, you actually get to see the personalities of individuals, and they all come with very unique stories, much like ourselves coming from the military, like Colton and I, and Jay coming from a broadcast background. So I think sometimes bringing just the sport into it, that's great, but learning about the people and learning about their stories is what I really enjoy about these kind of things that you guys are doing.
Absolutely. And from the military as well that sometimes the hottest, most badass guys who are like, you think they never have a, inkling of compassion in their bone, just because they're getting the task done. Those guys are usually the guys who have the most compassion and care the most. And some of these characters, you see them in there, especially some of the coaches, you're looking at them and you're like, wow, these are real hard-knuckle guys, and, they're really tossing around some four-letter words and, don't seem to have a care in the world except beating someone's face in. But, these are the guys that care the most. The purpose of this really originated from just bringing boxing back into Southie. The neighborhoods are changing. It's a different demographic. Like people coming from all over, like the local neighborhoods, their ideas of boxing and why it's important has changed. So bringing it back to the neighborhoods just as important to these guys as winning a fight, if not more. I mean, the ultimate goal is to get it back into the neighborhoods to build the farm system of getting good boxers, but also improving people's lives. My opponent, Tony McKenna, he was dealing with problems with drugs, and it literally saved him. Without an outlet like boxing, he's going back to that, and, what else do you have in life? And it just doesn't feel right. So boxing really saved him and pulled him from the streets, and people have heard that story a million times, but it makes it no difference whether it's one guy or the other. It's a real story, and the guy really needs it, and boxing really helps save his life and put it in a good direction.
Well, we hear all the time, Jay, I'll let you go after this, but one last statement. We hear it all the time. We talk about it like combatives. That's our sport in the military, and it saves lives. And we talk about mixed martial arts, and it saves lives. And people are like, how can you make that statement? And I said, well, the reason is you get around a team, and you do great things together, and then you start to realize that I can't do that stuff anymore because I can't be competitive. So you're almost forced out of your bad habits. And that's why I try to tell people a lot of times where, hey, if you're having a bad time of it, or whether it's PTSD, or whether it's a drug addiction or alcoholism, you get into the fight world and you're surrounded by these great people. And you know what? There's no time to have those habits anymore because you just can't compete with your buddies and you want to be a part of that team. So very often, more times than not, it's like a self-rehab. You know what I'm saying, Matt?
Absolutely. And that's a great point, because one of the great things about boxing, and I know anyone who is an MMA or boxing or any sport in general, is that it's the guys next to you that are really your support system and your strength. You don't want to let them down, and they're not going to let you down. And, I guess if you're going into rehab, you kind of got to find a sponsor and, hope for a support system. But when these guys are, prepping you for battle and, they've been in too, and even if you're not, even if you're just training, that camaraderie, it's like a whole other family with a real tight network of people. It can really change your perspective on the sport if you've never been in it, and you go in there and some of the hardest looking guys are the nicest guys, and they'll put your arm around your shoulder and say, it's all right, and they'll just teach you how do you live your life, and like wrestling or boxing or MMA, it teaches discipline. It teaches some real good core values that you should live your life with, and to see these people around you living their lives like with the same values, elevates your level of life.
Yeah, those are some great points. What do you got on this, Jay?
Well, we're talking to Matt Finney here on Pull No Punches Radio here on the Enlisted Nine No. 9 Fight Radio, brought to you by the Tan Talk Radio Network. Matt, now, real quick, we're talking a little bit about the show that's coming up, The Fighter, on the Discovery Channel. First thing people are going to ask is, what's the biggest difference between it and another previous boxing reality show, The Contender, that aired several years back?
I think first and foremost are the stories. We really get into the personal lives of the guys who are involved in it. It kind of just evolves as it goes. I feel like it's shot documentary style almost, and it's hard to get everything out in an hour. But it really focuses on the two guys fighting and the coaches. So what you're not going to see is tournament style, but what you will start to see is sort of prizes on the line and raising the stakes, and actually a couple showdowns that are pretty unique, throughout the whole episode. It's going to be a couple twists. I think The Contender really focused on, guys in the house, fighting, training, and, just interacting with each other on that base level. Whereas this one, the audience is really going to get to see each individual for who they are. It's just like back in the day when the neighborhood guys would get together, and you'd have one guy from, South Boston, one guy from Dorchester, one guy from Bridgewater. The neighborhoods get behind them, and, you can love a character, you can hate a character, but that's all right, You can love one character and hope he beats the crap out of the character you hate, But you're going to learn their stories, and you're going to get to know these people on a personal level and see, what it takes and what's in them in order to get in that ring, because it's easy to go through regular life, and just go through the motions, but it's a hard thing to step out of that and get in the ring along with it, especially when these guys, have to work full-time jobs, or, what have you, just to pay the bills and then get in the ring.
So now, next question. Obviously, boxing in recent memory has taken sort of a backseat to mixed martial arts, sort of a backseat to the other sports. How do you feel this show could potentially help bring it back into the spotlight? I don't feel it's out of the spotlight. I think MMA has definitely grown, and, regardless of what, the MMA purists will say, boxing is a very large part of MMA. Without it, you have some pretty crappy hands in there. But to bring boxing back, I think it's nice on a grassroots level. You have top guys in boxing, and obviously they're making, all the spotlight and all the money, but you have problems with building superstars up. Once the old guard is starting to leave boxing, you're kind of left with, the boxing arena trying to push stars on you that, nobody's really heard about, but all of a sudden they need to fill the spots and create stars. So, it's a little force-fed. The great thing about this show is going to be able to begin to build a feeder system, build a farm system. Like America used to be a powerhouse in boxing, and we've had some of our worst showings in the Olympics over the past few years, and somewhere like Europe and everywhere is getting better at boxing, and we're kind of falling behind. So I think it really comes from a lack of a farm system. So this show is the beginning of the building of a farm system. We'll start it in Boston. We'll go to other cities like Philadelphia, maybe New York. We'll get to these places and start to build up stars from the ground up, teach kids how to boxing from the ground up, and then people will get to know them, and it'll be coming up through a farm system where they can build their skills and get to know people, and people will get to know them. But as of right now, boxing it's not in a bad place, but it's not in a sustainable place. I think this show is going to really help build that link back to the top. Now, Matt, my last question for you. For those that are MMA fans, they may recognize you. You actually played the role of Michael Bisping in the Jorge Rivera-Michael Bisping files before that fight happened. Lead us through that. I mean, do you ever have any regrets doing that video and maybe how you were portrayed doing it? Or do you, would you have done it again?
Oh, of course not. Of course not. I had a lot of fun doing that. To anybody who's a decent human being, you just take a good laugh at it. But we had a lot of fun doing that. The fight really didn't have a lot of hype around it until we started doing that. So it was nice to generate a buzz. It was just been good fun, and we all had a good time with it. I don't even know. Obviously the guy got all pissed off, but if you go back and look at it, it's for no good reason. It's for made up reasons. So that's his own problem. But we don't have a problem with it.
Do you have any final questions for Matt?
Well, I wanted to touch on, I guess the question real fast was, you say boxing wasn't, basically dead in the water. I agree with you. But I'd love to see boxing get back to the days in the early 90s and 80s where there was so much more competition, there was so much hype. And I think what you're doing is you're building a bench, is what we call it. And it may be a 2 or 3 year program, but I think the future of boxing, as long as you guys get involved and start, like you said, building your farm leagues, I think people can find out who these guys are before they just get straight on the TV. So I like what you're doing, and I hope it really does work out for you.
I appreciate it, man. We got a ton of support. I mean, throughout the episodes and throughout the week, even up till now, I'm still getting a ton of Twitter messages and emails and, text messages. People just love it. And a lot of the review boards were awesome, too. So I'm hoping it's going to do exactly that and help us build it, and hoping that people get behind it because there's a lot of great stories to be told.
Well, you're always welcome, Matt, to come on this show whenever you want. You can talk about what you're doing, talk about how the show's evolving or what's the next direction for it. Hey, this is a great radio show, and, hey, you've done a great job for us. You're more than welcome to stay on as long as you want, and I just want to thank you for even giving us the opportunity to be able to interview you today.
I appreciate it, and thanks for having me on. The one thing I will say is hopefully that we get to have enough fights on this show I can get Reed Kuhn in there and start building some numbers to make my job easier.
Now, Matt, where can we find you on social media?
Say that again?
Where can we find you on social media?
I'm primarily on Twitter. My handle is @Matt_Finney. And they're pretty easy to get. So I'm on there, talking to people or doing whatever. I'm not with the Facebook. I can't stand it.
Wow.
All right, Matt, thanks for taking time out of your schedule to join us. Again, as Dan said, you're welcome to come back on here anytime.
Thanks very much. Appreciate you guys having me.
Appreciate it, man.
Take it easy.
That was Matt Jorge Rivera's version of Michael Bisping Finney, guy on the Discovery Channel's big upcoming show, The Fighter. We definitely guys want to check that out when it does come back. Dan, I think they're on a bit of a hiatus now, but that's a show that might actually get me interested in boxing again. And speaking of people that might get me interested in boxing again, we'd be remiss if we didn't introduce our third co-host here, the man who's got a little bit of boxing in his own right, the one and only Chris Lights Out Lytle. Chris, welcome to the show, bud.
I'm sorry I'm a little bit late today.
No, hey, we're always glad to have you on. It's we know you're a busy man. Got some wrestling tournaments going on, huh?
Yeah, we got the state tournament going on right now, so I'm trying to coach my team to victory here.
Awesome. Well, we're certainly hopeful to hear about the big victory next week. Now, real quick, while that's going on, we just talked to Matt Finney, who's on a big upcoming boxing reality show on the Discovery Channel. You got some big news regarding boxing yourself, right? I mean, has there been any progress with the Roy Jones Jr. situation? Any news that you'd like to report on that?
Just hearing that, my people are in negotiations, and there's actually talks happening right now. So there's some good possibilities. I'm extremely excited about the chance to fight Roy. He's always been kind of one of the greatest fighters in the world, in my opinion. So just to be actually be in the ring with him like that would be quite an honor for me, and I'm very excited for the possibilities.
Well, mark my words, Dan, when this gets signed, Chris Lytle versus Roy Jones Jr., we're going to be have to make a pull no punches enlisted 9 trip to see this for ourselves, do a broadcast from it, you know what I mean?
Oh, I'm all about it.
I like it. I'll do it in the morning and fight that night.
I'm down with that idea. Live remote. What do you think, Dano?
Oh, I'm all about it. Hey, Chris, I hope this goes for you, buddy. I think it'll be a great way to, I don't know, bring your boxing career back, but at the same time, I think it's such an interesting battle that I'm excited about it. I hope it works.
I do too, man. Appreciate it.
Now, that being said, we'll move on to some topics about what's going on in the world of sports. Obviously, the big one this week. So we got another guest coming on here in about 15 minutes. But wanted to brush on the Super Bowl a little bit. Obviously, the big matchup, the old AFC West rivals, the Seattle Seahawks, the Denver Broncos, getting ready to take the field. Super Bowl number 48. Well, it's hard to believe there's been 48 Super Bowls, but we're at it. Now, I'm going to lead it off, Chris, to you as we head into this football game. What is the tale of the tape? If you're John Fox, how are you bracing and preparing for the how are you preparing, for the Seattle Seahawks?
Well, Seattle, I think what you're going to have to really concentrate on is you're going to have to concentrate on the running back, Marshawn Lynch. Kind of as he goes, as they go, in my opinion. If you can do whatever you can to stop them, force Russell Wilson to beat you in the passing game. I know he's a great and dynamic quarterback and whatnot, but I just don't see them having the firepower with the receivers to be able to to compete with Denver's. I think, Denver has a great set of players. I know they're going against the number one defense in the world, but I think eventually he's going to break a few big plays. So you might have a few big plays on Denver's side. Can Seattle do the same thing? So if they can stop Marshawn Lynch and keep the ball in the hands of Denver as much as possible, I think Denver has a great chance of beating them.
Now, Dan, what are your thoughts? You're going to play the role of John. We had Chris play the role of John Fox. We had a role of John Fox. You played a role of Pete Carroll. You're Pete Carroll here on the program. You're Seattle. What game plan are you doing? What is your tail of the tape? How do you stop this Denver offense? What do you do to pick up the W?
Well, I'll tell you, if I'm back coach in about, excuse me, I'm going to tell them straight up, hey, guys, we got here from one thing. We got here from aggression. We got here from making good open field tackles. We are going to give up the 5 and 20-yard plays, but we have got to stop it as soon as it happens. I think yards after the catch, the yak factor is full in effect in order for the Seattle Seahawks to win this game.
We got Reed. We have Reed. Reed in the house.
What I'm going to do is, if I'm Seattle, real quick, because we do got our next guest on the line, calling a little bit early, which is good, but got our next guest on the line. We'll get to him in one moment. But if I'm Seattle, here's what I do. Peyton Manning, and Chris, you can vouch for this being an Indianapolis Colts fan, having seen Peyton for the junk of the majority of his career. Peyton Manning is one of those quarterbacks, if you put endless pressure on him, he's going to struggle. And that's anybody. I mean, that's not exactly rocket science. You put pressure on a quarterback, they're not the same. But Manning, a guy who facing the pass rush is he's not the quarterback he was. He's not the quarterback he is when he's getting 6 man up in a box. And that's what Seattle does best. If I'm Seattle and I'm Dan Quinn, the defensive coordinator, I'm nonstop pressure, whether it be Bruce Irvin, whether it be Cliff Averill. I'm putting all men on deck and really making Manning make mistakes, forcing Manning to make the throws, because Seattle's secondary is good enough to where they can shut that passing game down. But to me, the biggest tail of this tape, before we get to our guest, is putting that pressure on Manning at all times, is making Manning really put him in an uncomfortable situation and forcing him to beat him from there. Now, from a Denver standpoint, Chris, I think you nailed it right on the head. It's a simple fact of get the football, do what you do best offensively, because Seattle, they've got an advantage at the halfback position. I think that Marshawn Lynch is a better halfback than Moreno. But other than that, I think Denver, offensively, they got better receivers. With due respect to Russell Wilson, he's a good quarterback, but he's not on Manning's level. Make it an offensive game, turn it into a track meet, and pull what the Broncos have done all year, and that's score points in mass. I don't think Seattle keeps up with that. With that being said, we have our next guest on the line, author of a great book. We'll let him tell us about it. Reed joins us. I'm sorry, Dan. What's Reed's name? If you can introduce him.
Yes, hey, Reed, you with us, buddy?
I'm here.
All right,
I want to introduce yourself. Reed, thank you for joining us. Good.
No, I'm just going to say we're going to talk about your book, Fightnomics. Go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know about the book, and let's talk about it.
I'm Reed Kuhn. I wrote Fightnomics along with New York Times bestselling author Kelly Krieger, who has previously authored a few books in the world of MMA. And this was our attempt to basically use numbers to analyze every aspect of the sport, explain it better, look at the trends and also the competitive advantages that exist, even betting lines to see how accurate they've actually been, and maybe in a few places they've actually been inaccurate. So it's the first time anybody's actually quantitatively analyzed MMA using statistics.
Awesome. Now, tell us a little about this book, Reed. I mean, obviously, for those that haven't had a chance to read it, what's it about? What's the crux of it? What story are you telling in it? What are you trying to explain with it?
Well, there isn't really a story like Moneyball. This is actually more foundational. We're actually introducing, if you've ever heard of stats in MMA, it's probably from a company called Fightmetric. Those are the stats that get quoted on UFC Tonight and during fight nights. And it's actually a fairly complicated system. So for the first time, we wanted to actually explain how the data works. All the different striking categories, for example, how many different types of takedowns are tracked, what types of positions are tracked. So all of this information exists, but no one's ever really analyzed it and actually told the world what the results are. Being able to talk about submissions, for example. Well, not all submissions are treated equal. Some are more successful than others. Some are attempted more frequently than others. So the statistics allow us to talk about these things and really compare them apples to apples and and definitively answer ongoing questions about how MMA really works.
Now, our co-host on the show, Chris Lytle, who's with us now, has been, I'm going to say, Chris, with apologies to you, a victim of some pretty, what I consider to be lackluster decisions. So I got to ask you, from your perspective, having done this in-depth research, how foolproof do you think that judging, that this scoring system is? I mean, how foolproof do you think that metric by metric, fight metric works? I mean, how break this down for us.
Well, the statistics aren't used by the judges, and I did analyze historical judging decisions, and I think people would be amazed with how much disagreement there is among judges. You're talking about trained professionals who are being paid to judge the fight, and first of all, at the end of a decision, they disagree with each other about a quarter of the time, historically. So that's the same three judges watching the exact same two fighters compete for 15 or 25 minutes, and they disagree with each other 1 in 4 times. That's a lot of disagreement. And if you look at it on a round-by-round basis, it actually jumps up over 60%. So that means the majority of all fights, the judges will disagree on at least one round. So basically, they're using different criteria to evaluate fighters, and I think they really need to improve the process. And so my point in making this chapter and this analysis in the book was to just highlight that fact. And I actually ran some additional analysis on how often 10-8 rounds are awarded, and even isolating the most experienced judges and looking only at fights where they judged the same two fighters, the disagreement actually goes down. So there is something to be said for experience among judges, but I am surprised that this type of analysis, it hasn't been done before, that the UFC isn't using this as an argument to say, hey, you guys need to step up your game and improve your processes.
We're talking to Reed Kuhn here on Full No Punches Radio at Enlisted 9, powered by Enlisted 9 Fighting Company, brought to you by the Tan Talk Radio Network. Dan, what questions do you have for Reed?
Well, Reed, I just wanted to ask you this. I love the idea of the book, and I know Kelly pretty well back in my Ranger Up days, but the bottom line I want to know is if a judge reads this book, will it bring some insight to a judge and maybe help the sport a little bit better? And then after you answer my question, I definitely want Chris to ask a question, because he's been in this situation more than any of us, and I want to see what his agreements or disagreements are with the judges in this kind of book.
Well, to answer your question, yeah, I do think judges would probably benefit, because I've actually listened to judges talk about how they score, and first of all, they're not telling the same story, even though there are unified rules that they're supposed to be following. When they actually describe how they watch and what they're looking for, it doesn't always sound the same. And when you talk about, first of all, there's a rule that says effective striking. If the fight is staying on its feet, there's actually more disagreement than if the fight is on the ground. Because on the ground, the judges normally simply give it to the top control fighter. And whether or not that's the right or the wrong way to judge it, that's simply the reality. They usually just score whoever's in top control, even if they're not doing much. But when it comes to stand-up, a lot of these judges are former boxing officials. There's actually a great deal of disagreement in terms of who is winning a round that stays on its feet. And historically, these guys are almost always leaning towards whichever fighter throws more volume, not who actually lands more. And so that has been steering decisions for a long time, and I don't think fighters really understand that it's not how well they're striking, how effective they're striking. It's simply who looks busier. And I don't necessarily think that's the best way to judge a round and judge a fighter, because I think there's a great deal of nuance and skill involved in who's landing the better strikes. But unfortunately, judges are just taking the easy way out, and they're basically awarding the round to whoever looked busier.
Now, Chris, you've been on the side of the wrong side of the judges' scorecard. How accurate do you think that what Reed's saying here, how accurate do you think his comments are with this, that it's about volume, not necessarily what you're doing with that volume?
I think that could be very accurate. I also think, in addition to that, sometimes the volume plays more of an important factor as opposed to damage. That's what I'm about when it comes to me. Is I'm about who's doing the most damage. Whoever's doing the most damage, in my opinion, is probably winning the fight. Now, there's when you get the situation when you have a guy. Like I know when Nick Diaz fought Carlos Condit, he was unhappy because Carlos might have kicked him in the leg 3 times, and he lands one punch, and he's going, I'm winning. Because, yeah, he's landing a good punch, but he got kicked in the leg 3 times. To me, those 3 leg kicks don't mean anything if they're not effective and they're not doing a lot. He's throwing more volume, and in this case, he might have actually been landing. It wasn't just the fact that he was throwing them and missing them, but I'm about whoever's going to do the most damage. And I think what they would like to do, I'd like to see this book or whatnot be not only introduced to the officials, but I think they need to revamp the entire system of scoring. I was a big fan of the Pride system. I think you need to get all the commission people involved and say, hey, we want to score this to be giving more and more emphasis on trying to finish the fight, trying to push forward, trying to a lot of action, and who's doing the most damage. That way, you're going to encourage the fighters to try and do that style. Right now, they're teaching fighters, hey, if you just throw a few punches and land a few more punches and you control the guy, you're going to win the fight. So you know what? People are going to fight like that. We don't want to see people fight like that. We want to see people go out there and try and take the other guy's head off. So it's hard for them to do that if they know if they can play it safe, they're going to win a decision. And when the money gets greater, if you always notice when there's a title fight eliminator, where like whoever wins this fight gets a fight for the title, they're always boring fights because people are afraid to lose. They just want to go out there and do enough to win. So they need to do something, like you say, where they can introduce them to do the officials to say, we're going to count, the most effective striker, not the guy who's out there throwing the most or landing the most small strikes is going to be doing the most damage.
Now, Reed, what do you think? I mean, I like the idea, like Chris said, of bringing the Pride system back. What do you think is preventing the UFC from capitalizing on this so we're not seeing these fights that are not necessarily the most action-packed?
Well, it would be a pretty big change to change the rules or how the rounds go, and I just think that it's the status quo bias. Change, everybody fears change even when we want it, and so to change all the rules and change how it's done, I'm sure Dana White has pondered it before. I just think he hesitates because it would be such a big deal, and there would be so much of a headache with the commissions and everything else.
You know what? I disagree with that assessment, because in my opinion, people think this is the UFC doing this and the UFC is doing that. I don't think Dana White likes the decision making. I don't think he likes it. This is the Athletic Commission or the Gaming Commission, whoever's in charge. That's who's in charge of it. That's who we need to be dealing with is the athletic commissions, the Las Vegas Athletic Commission. The UFC doesn't have much say on what they do. So it has to come from the athletic standpoint, the athletic commission or whoever the commission involved who's teaching these judges or teaching the rep, whatnot. They're the ones who's going to have to be sat down and say, hey, we need to do something different with this sport or it's going to really hurt it in the future. And the possible growth, we don't want to go the way of boxing where you're going to have the Floyd Mayweathers who kind of want to sit there and land 4 jabs around and move around. I don't want to see that. So I don't want MMA to turn into that as well.
Exactly. Reed, what's your retaliation of that?
Well, I believe that they should be doing a better job of analyzing what they've done. Look back at fights that were controversial and understand why the judges scored it one way or the other and come to an agreement and say, you know what? Under the rules, maybe they chose the right winner, but let's rethink the rules. Every process can be re-engineered and thought about, is this satisfying us? And the way that judges' decisions have gone recently, and just the backlash from everybody from Dana White to the fans to the fighters themselves, clearly there's some dissatisfaction going on with the judging performance. And no, it doesn't seem like anybody is being held accountable for that, or that the commission itself is even analyzing their records to say, you know what, here's an example of a fight where this judge went this way and he was wrong in that, and we need to educate him either on the rules or train him up on being able to understand jiu-jitsu a little bit better, whatever it is. Identify the problem and actually fix it. Right now, we just keep going, and there's controversial decisions pretty much on every card, and there's certainly disagreement the majority of the time, and all of those things are bad.
No case more ample than the fight we just had last weekend between Benson Henderson and Josh Thompson. I mean, you talk to 10 people, 5 of them will say Benson won, 5 of them will say Josh won. But listen, Reed, we could certainly discuss this topic all day. I know we're up against it. But, Dan, do you have any last couple of questions for Reed?
No, I'm glad he came on the show because I was interested in this book. I talked to Toby Nunn about it and a few other guys, and they said that you were able to break down the analysis and everything. I'm interested to read it because I think it's something that is good for fighters to read also, because it'll teach them maybe some pointers on where the big money things are in the judges' eyes, where to make your most points and everything else. So I think it's awesome, and I can't wait to read it.
I I appreciate that. Yeah, I've gotten overwhelmingly positive feedback from fighters and coaches so far. There's a few big-name trainers out there who've been using my analysis in terms of scouting reports. I look at stats for pretty much every card now, and I post some detailed analysis. I did detailed articles on both championship matchups this weekend. And so my stats are out there. The book is out there. The blog, I tweet, I share these stats because I want people to start using the information more, because I think it helps people appreciate the complexity of mixed martial arts a lot better when they see all the nuances and how it really works. Because 10 years ago, people just saw two guys fighting in a cage, and there's a lot more to it. Obviously, a guy like Chris can tell you how complicated his thought processes are when he's going through a fight. There are so many different little things that could lead to a finish. It is truly a game of millimeters and seconds, and so I hope that fans can better appreciate how complicated this really is. So the numbers are just one way to help do that.
Now, Reed, real quick, where can we pick this book up, and where can we check your information on it?
Yeah, it's Fightnomics.com, all one word, Fightnomics, the way it sounds. And if you search for it on Amazon, you'll find it there. It's in print and also digital book, so you can download it. And for international customers, we have a few on eBay that we can ship to Canada and UK, et cetera. But if you just search Fightnomics, you'll find me on Twitter and Facebook and online. And one last stat, Chris Lytle, I just peeked at your stats, your historical stats. You have one of the most accurate jabs in UFC history. Did you know that?
Yeah, because I only threw about 3 of them. So. I was more of a haymaker type of guy. I surprised people when I threw them. They're like, "What is that?" I remember one fight, Joe Rogan said, "Rare jab thrown by Chris Lytle." I was like, "Hey, Joe, come on, man! I threw some jabs, but it was funny." Hey, I want to thank you for writing this, because I think it's definite need that needs to be done with this sport, because once again, I love the sport. Many people love the sport, and we want to make sure that the judging is going in the right direction. I think people see a problem with it, and we're going to do what we can to fix it. So this is just one tool that we can use to help. So I appreciate you doing. Another thing that I thought that I'd like to try to implement is trying to get some ex-fighters or some retired fighters to start becoming judges, because I think that's another problem. We have some people in there who've never been in a fight in their life, and they're judging other people's who's winning this fight. I totally disagree with that.
I agree.
I agree.
Yeah,
I'm with you
one
on that.
thing New Jersey has right. I know one. You're using your example, Chris. We'll see one tonight at UFC 169. Ricardo Almeida, former mixed martial artist, fought in the UFC, fought in Pride, high level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. To me, those are the type of judges we need to see, not the former boxers, because you've done both. There's a big difference between boxing and mixed martial arts criteria-wise. So we need to see more of that. But Reed, we'll let you go. Thanks for coming on again, man.
Thanks. And Ricardo Almeida has read the book, so that's another plus in his
Nice.
Thanks a lot, guys. Awesome. Have a good one.
Take care, Reed.
Bye.
That was Reed Kuhn, author of Fightnomics. Be sure to check it out. What an interesting story. I'll tell you what, man, I didn't want to cut that guy off because we are running against the time. I'd love to bring him back on, Dan, and we could do a fight-by-fight breakdown. That would be an hour show in its own right.
Oh, I'm all about it. And Chris, I appreciate you saying that, too, about it's good that he wrote that book, because this could be good for everybody in the sport. And I hope that everybody will catch on to this book.
Absolutely. Looking forward to grabbing one myself. But hey, we got about 6 minutes left here in the program. Obviously, we broke down a little bit of the Super Bowl. Got 2 big fights tonight, though. The Super Bowl of mixed martial arts, the UFC 169, taking place in New Jersey. You got 2 title fights. We got Renan Barão taking on Uriah Faber, rematch of UFC 147. Fight that was won by, obviously, Barão. Now this one for all the marbles. It will be for the UFC bantamweight title. Chris, kick us off. How do you see this fight playing down? Real quick prediction, who do you see winning it?
I think Uriah Faber's been looking really good. I think he's looking fantastic. He looks like he's rejuvenated his career. He's 4-0 in the last year. His hand's all healthy. It's not broken. And all that being said, I unfortunately think he's going to lose the decision. I would love to see him win. I just don't see it happening. I just think it's just going to be a tough fight for him. I just see him losing it via decision. That's what I would have to bet if I was a betting person.
Absolutely. Dan O'Brien, what do you think?
Well, if Uriah can apply that pressure, that pit bull mentality, and he could get in there and let those hands go like he did last fight, I think he's got a really nice chance. I'm going to go with him just because if he doesn't do it now, he's not going to do it. And I've always liked Uriah, so I'm going to go ahead and stay on that.
Awesome. Now, to me, Barao, I got to ask this question from Faber's perspective. How much did that loss get into his head at 147? I mean, he lost the interim title fight to, Barao. Is Faber cerebral enough of a fighter to rebound from a loss like that and pick up a win? Obviously, he's a much better fighter now. I mean, the Dwayne Bang Ludwig, coaching scenario has made him took him from a great fighter to an even, dare I say, elite. But is he on Renan Barao's level of elite? We'll find out tonight. Me, I don't know. I mean, to me, Uriah Faber's biggest Achilles heel has been the leg kick. That's how Aldo beat him. That's how Barao beat him the first time. I think that's how Barao's going to do it this time. I think he's going to continuously leg kick him for 5 rounds and, on way to another decision. Co-main event of this one will be for the featherweight title. Man, I consider right now to be the best pound-for-pound fighter in the sport, bar none. Jose Aldo takes on the tough and gritty Ricardo Lamas. Now, I'm a big Lamas fan. I'm a big fan of the guys at Team Top Notch. I don't know. I'll give my thoughts in a minute. Dan, lead us off. How do you see this fight playing down?
Oh, I think Aldo all the way. I just think that he's just too outclassed. I think he's going to go in there. I think the first 2 rounds are going to tell the story.
Hey, so you're going with Aldo. Chris, what do you think?
I mean, I hate to do it, but 100% agreement right there. I think Aldo's going to use his leg kicks. He's just one of the most devastating strikers with those that we have in the sport, and I think that you're going to see it. You're going to see it tonight. He's just going to dominate on his feet. He can dominate on the ground if he wants, but I don't think he's going to need to. I think he does such a good job of avoiding the takedown, landing leg kicks, landing strikes when he needs to. I think that's what we're going to see tonight, and it's going to be a long night for Lamas.
I agree. I think it's going to be a long night, but I think it's going to be a very short night. I'm a fan of Ricardo Lamas. I like the guy personally. One of the nicest gentlemen you'll meet in the sport. Love his team Top Notch in Chicago, Mac Ramos and the Sandoval brothers. Great team they got up there, but I just right now I think Jose Aldo is there's maybe 2 or 3 people I think in within his weight range. I'm talking 155, 145, 135 that can beat him. Sadly, I don't think Ricardo Lamas is one of them. I'm going to go with Aldo by knockout, round number 2. That being said, we got about 2 minutes left, so real quick, let's break down, give our predictions, official predictions for the Super Bowl. Chris, lead us off. Who do you see winning? What's the final score?
I think it's going to be a pretty close match, obviously, but like I said earlier, I think Denver is going to have a little bit more firepower. They're going to throw some bigger plays, get a little bit more passing yards. I think they plus the big ones. I think they're going to win 21-15.
21-15. Dan, how do you see it playing down? What's your final score? Who do you see winning?
I see it at about 24-31 with Prater having probably about 4 or 5 field goals, the world record holder in the field goals. I think there's going to be a lot to do with the kick game this week.
I'm going to go off the side of this. I'm going to play devil's advocate. I'm picking Seattle. I think that pass rush, I think that Richard Sherman being able to lock down on their wide receivers, I think he'll lock down on Welker. And Seattle, keep this in mind, has given up 5 touchdowns all season to tight end, so that'll take Julius Thomas out of the game. I think that they're going to try to make Noshan Moreno beat him, and I'm just not so sure he can. I'm going to go with Seattle in this one with a bit of surprise, or 24-21. But that'll wrap it up for this week's show. And we'd like to thank you, as always, for joining us here on Pull No Punches on the Tan Talk Radio Network. For my co-host, Chris Lytle, and Dan O'Brien and Listed 9 Fight Company, I am Jay Pagliaro. We will talk to you next Saturday right here on Pull No Punches Radio on the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Taking it back. I wish I knew then what I know right now. When my parents split, that's when it shook my ground. No source of strength now, my life wasn't clear. Cracks in the foundation, I was living in fear. Paycheck to paycheck, 3 jobs at a time. Mom tried, I watched her crying, not receiving a dime. My father was gone, he was doing his thing. As the years went by, my